My name is Genevieve Cox. I am from Corpus Christi, Texas. I go to W.B. Wright High School here, and I've been doing congressional debate since I was in sixth grade. Um, Recently, I championed the Harvard tournament and got second at TOC, and I'm here to answer some of Mackenzie's questions.
Hello, I'm Clinton Oreofe. I'm from A. Hastings High School in Houston, Texas. I'm debate captain of my school. I've been competing in speech and debate since middle school about now, but I've been doing Congress since my sophomore year, and now I'm a junior. I'm about to be a senior. So this was my second year doing Congress. I think I did pretty well, and I come from a relatively small school, and I'm the only one that does Congress on my team. So I hope that I represented my school pretty well this past year.
Hey everyone, my name is Luca. I've been doing debate since the 7th grade, and since then I've just really enjoyed my time in congressional debate. Been in the NSDA House Finals 2 times, as well as the TOC Finals twice. This year I was actually the Florida State champion in congressional debate, and in my lengthy career I've had experience outside of that too, but really I've had a tremendous time competing in this event that I love.
I'm Hunter. I did speech and debate for 4 years, mainly congressional debate, extemporaneous speaking, and I am currently a rising sophomore attending Rice University studying political science.
I use he and his pronouns, and I'm a first year at Washington University in St. Louis. I did 4 years of congressional debate when I was in high school, and I was a 2-year member of the USA Debate team.
Hi, I'm Kaitlyn Maher, and I've been doing Congress for the past year and a half now. This year, most notably, I placed third at the Tournament of Champions, and in the past, I've reached semifinal rounds at Harvard, at Emory, at Bronx, and at Yale, and at multiple other national tournaments over the course of my career. And I was the recipient of the quarterfinalist leadership award at Harvard as well, and have really enjoyed just getting to compete on the circuit and helping to coach novices on my own team and participating in Congress. And so, yeah, that's a bit of my experience.
Eesha Barua. I'm in congressional debate, and I live in Raleigh, North Carolina. North Carolina as a circuit for debate is pretty mediocre. We're not too big or we're not too small. But the school I'm from doesn't really have a established speech and debate program, so it's been really interesting.
So I think that Nats is kind of a unique tournament in that it has a lot of rounds, especially if you're doing house. And in those rounds, there's a lot of pieces of legislation that you have to prepare for. And also they don't really give you a heads up of how they want it ordered. You don't really talk to people about it until the day before. So there's a lot of preparing to be done for Nats. I would say that it's probably the best course of action to start off with prelims because it's the most, they have the most legislation that you have to prepare for. And then for the individual bills, I like to read over the bill and then Google any terms or specific legislations that are confusing or that I've never heard about, I don't know about. And then after I get a general grasp on the background knowledge, then I start to look at, just read articles about the topic that extend a little farther than just general background knowledge. That show the history of why the topic is being debated, why the legislation's been introduced, the context behind it, and usually the arguments sort of pop up from there.
We're using each and every day I had the docket in front of me to try and prepare at least one new bill. Sure, at times it's a very tedious process, and sure, at times it can feel incredibly unrewarding or repetitive, but the only way you're truly going to be able to go in to such an important national tournament ready is to have the most amount of information possible. Outside of just prepping every day, I would also make sure to take steps to work with my coach at least 3 or 4 times a week. And even if you don't have a coach, just giving speeches to other students on your team is an absolute necessity to go into Nats ready.
Preparation for nationals pretty much matches the way that I prepare for every other tournament, which is that when I look at a bill, before I go into the specifics of that bill itself. I try to give myself like a good idea of how I feel about this topic. Some topics I'm more informed on or others. So really the process boils down onto whether I have a pre-formulated opinion on that topic versus topics that I'm less familiar with. Once that is established, whether I feel comfortable with the subject or not, if I don't feel comfortable, I enjoy doing some topic research, skimming the news. If it's for a foreign affairs bill and we're discussing a particular country, I want to know what the political culture of that country is like, what the structure of government is. Really, my process follows a deductive reasoning track in a sense, because I like to start with like the larger concepts and then finally read into the details of the bill and see how this bill specifics toy with this bigger issue. I really enjoy this process because I like to know the context of that political issue before I go down to the specifics of the bill and how this legislation would toy with that
very
context.
lazy, but like I can get like unmotivated at sometimes. So I've been spreading apart how much time that I prep certain bills, or like bi-daily or bi-weekly sometimes, because normally if it was a regular tournament that was physical, then I would spend about like one day designated on straight preparation. But since I have quarantine, I have so much time in my hands, I can spread it out however much I like.
Okay. The next
when I went to a national tournament, I would try to read up on the issues, and I think it was a more consistent process than a one-time, I do all my prep at once. Just by catching up on current events, I learned a lot about what was going on and the way that the world worked, and that helped me really contextualize my arguments when I got into rounds, and allowed me to spend less time preparing for every specific bill because I would have more context than other students.
Process is very similar to what I did for TOC. I'll share a little bit about how that goes. So basically the way that I prepare is I start by just like reading through the bills and just looking and just trying to internalize some of the concepts and some of the things and actions that the bills are going to be taking and some of the steps. And then I often will look back into some of my previous prep documents from other tournaments to see if I have any back files, and basically that just means if I have any prep from other tournaments or other bills in the past that I've debated that are applicable for what I'll be debating at nationals. And once I've done that, and once I've inserted that prep into my prep document or just revised it or anything like that, I'll typically work to just fit an outline. And so the way that I typically outline my speeches is I have the point and like affirm this bill because X or negate this bill because X, and then that's your first point, and then you have like several pieces of evidence in addition to your claim and then your warrant, and so like claim, warrant, data, impact, and then you do that for 2 points. And so and then once I do that for all the bills, just go back and add intros or conclusions or do that as I go if necessary. But honestly, a lot of it does happen on the fly. So like once I'm in the round, because I really like doing refutation speeches and like often like fully refutation speeches. So I don't end up actually using most of the prep that I walk in with, but it's good to have because it makes you feel like reassured going in that you have something to say. So yeah.
I start about 2 weeks before the tournament, and before I really try to get into finding points, which I think can be very anxiety inducing, I like to just research and find as many like TV shows or articles or movies or anything within the source of the topic for prep. And then from there, I'll go on and look at the more research-based side of all of the preparatory topics that we go through. And that usually comes in handy with current events and all that kind of stuff.
All the way up until final.
So I like to say that there is uncertainty in every round, so I try to keep the same mindset. Obviously, there's a bit more pressure in out rounds than there is in prelims, but I would say that there's also like a lot of pressure in prelims, because even if you give the best speeches you've given your entire life in your prelim round, there's still the chance that you're going to have a judge who doesn't appreciate your style or has never judged Congress before. So I think it's important to keep your mindset relatively the same as you go throughout the tournament. Obviously the pressure increases, but I think there's that level of uncertainty that is constant throughout every round that makes you stay on your feet regardless of which round you're in.
Me, at least, it could be different for other people, but for me, at least, it definitely stays the same. And it's just one motto that happened after I finaled for the first time at a bid tournament. My friend called me and he was like, we still have stuff to do. It's just a basically saying that even though I can be progressing as much, there's still unfinished business, because in the end, there can only be one national champion in-house.
I think on a larger scale, especially when you're moving up to things like quarters and semis and finals, you start to recognize that a lot of the things that made you different or stand out in prelims aren't going to cut it when you're dealing with a more advanced round. Things like basic fluency or making sense argumentatively are not going to be enough when every single other person has those talents in a round like semifinals or like national finals. We've weeded out all the weaker competitors. You're just dealing with top brass. In those moments, I think the most important thing I did mindset-wise was ask myself, what am I going to bring to the table with this speech that no other competitor is going to do? Things like character, things like rhetoric, and things like emotional presentation all become really important when everyone is crisp and logically sound. You need to find ways to have your personality shine through.
That my mindset I definitely have some more like, I don't know, I guess like a little more stress about out rounds, in that like it's more competitive, you're with better people, most likely, and sometimes out rounds can be a little more stressful because it's a smaller break and things like that. But I think generally speaking, it's just reminding yourself that like if you get into an out round, you're there for a reason, you've done well, and you can do it. And then in prelims, it's just, you gotta like get that break. But if you don't end up breaking, then like that's okay. It's not the end of the world. Like it happens to everyone. So it's really just trying to take each speech, like one speech at a time, and just power through and to like say some things that matter in the process. And
in preliminary rounds, I kind of have myself, I try to like almost forcefully boost my confidence, because it's mainly confidence to me that makes or breaks the round. And then in elimination rounds, it's really hard to gauge how successful I'll be, because when I was younger, I didn't have enough self-confidence or self-esteem to actually prepare for elimination rounds. And then I would get into them and do badly and then blame myself for not being talented enough. But now I've kind of started building up my confidence in elimination rounds and acting the very same way that I do in prelims and trying to be consistent throughout them.
That's a really good question. I think that I like to relax in between rounds. Something that really relaxes me is just like listening to music and sitting on the ground and closing my eyes and just like forgetting that I'm in like a really stressful tournament. So I would say whatever relaxes you the most, whether that's just like maybe lying down for a little bit on a couch or listening to music or reading a little piece or like rereading your speeches so you have them really packed down. Whatever relaxes you the most, I would say to do that in between rounds, because I think while it's incredibly important to stay in the mindset of the tournament, none of that is worth it if you're being burnt out and you can't focus on the tournament in the first place. So I would say to just do what relaxes you in between breaks, in between sessions, in between days, and also try to get as much sleep as possible. That really helps me. I know it's hard sometimes on tournament days because you need to prepare, but getting sleep also helps.
Number one answer to that is I listen to music. Music calms me down extremely. Sometimes it depends. If I felt like I had a bad round beginning at first, then I would listen to hype music to get myself energized. Or if I feel like I did very well, then I would listen to like super chill music so I can keep that same motto and keep that same strength.
Okay, thank you.
You need to want it. Like there is no denying that it is an incredibly exhausting tournament when you're dealing with a good, like I'd say 8 hours of prelims and then like 6 hours of quarters, because that got introduced last year for House of Representatives. The number one thing that kept me going on that round was I knew I wanted to have that national championship not just as a means of having like this title over other people, but also as a means of proving to myself that I had made something better out of my abilities as a speaker with this activity. If you want to avoid burnout in Congress, especially at the national tournament, you need to remind yourself why you're doing this in the first place. What are you still fighting for? And why is that going to matter going into day 2 or day 3 or day 4 of this marathon-like activity?
I would say, so this is actually a bit of a different answer probably. I face burnout more so between different tournaments than I do between rounds. Typically between rounds, I'm more just like in go mode and there's so much adrenaline that it's like I only really, like I get wiped out right after a tournament is done. And in like the next weeks after it. But between rounds, I definitely have a lot of energy. And the way that I keep up that energy and like don't get tired is honestly by like making sure that like I eat between rounds, I think has been really important, even if I really don't want to. Making sure that I sleep and not going to bed at like a crazy time, even if like friends are staying up, because you want to have time to like talk to people. And like obviously like at in-person tournaments, it's different. But I think definitely sleep, eat food, drink a lot of water, and yeah, just make sure you're hydrated, fresh, and you're feeling good. And it's okay to take a break to like go listen to music or just like.
Well, this is actually a really funny question because, I mean, I started when I was 13 years old, so I've been doing this for a really long time, and there have definitely been times along the road at tournaments in between where I'm just like, oh my God, like, I don't know if I can do this anymore. But for me, it all comes down to my love of politics and my love of communication. The special thing about congressional debate that I think differentiates it from the other events is that whereas in PF or LD, you might be talking about a question of ethics or philosophy, or B, a technical issue that is more specific to the structure of debate. In Congress, you're always dealing with public policy that impacts people's lives. And even if you don't experience the implications of that particular problem, you've likely faced something like it, and you likely know someone who you love that has faced something like that. And I think that when you think about the issues that are impacting people every single day, like, and the fact that this is a democracy where you have the ability to participate and change people's lives, talking about these issues in congressional debate, not only talking, but listening to other people, this is really what invigorates me and reminds me why I'm doing this and reminds me why I want to move to that next round regardless of awards. It's the fact that I really enjoy debating policy. And the friends that I've made along the way, I think a lot of them are going to go into government. And I think that these discussions will serve as some part of a formative process in making decisions. And that to me is like the magic of it.
Yes, yeah.
Also, energy.
Originally, like when I did debate, I was like really bad at public speaking, and I had a very like stuttery voice that was very quiet and fast. So I was honestly like very anxious when I walked into a round, and over time, the stress just got less and less because I was going to rounds and I would see people and I'd be like, oh, I know these folks. Like, I wasn't super uncomfortable like being able to speak in front of people. So I honestly think it just came with practice to reduce that stress over time.
I think that since there's a lot of people, and I'm not sure how much this is going to change considering that NATS is online this year, but there's a lot of judges at NATS who are like coaches who have never coached Congress before, or people who have never judged Congress before. So I think it's really important to be able to appeal to those people, especially since that's like kind of what you need to do as you go throughout not only your debate career but like your life in general. When you need to talk to people, often they don't know what you're talking about. And I think it's really easy to get caught up in like the debate terminology of Congress and get into this rhythm of like only appealing to judges who flow the entire round and know exactly what you're talking about. But that's not the reality of life. I think that you need to appeal to every person, regardless of their experience and background knowledge.
The first thing I would say that I've learned is even if you do all the research that is available from scholarly sources, every PDF, every reputable source and study, you really don't get a true understanding of the issue until you're actually hearing from the stakeholders themselves. I think that all the research on paper and real facts and real numbers, of course they have so much weighted importance, but there have been times when I go into a round with a conviction. It's like I'm not arguing for this for competition's sake. I'm truly arguing for this because this is my stance at this point. And then there are times when I come out of the room and I'm like, wow, I completely didn't understand this situation. There are some lived experiences that people have that no amount of research could ever possibly compete with. Like when we're discussing countries and some people, the good thing about debate is that it brings such a diverse community of so many people, so many children of immigrants, like etc. When you hear from people who have been to that country, who have seen the conflict or the scenario or even the capital city in question, you gain a new perspective that the internet or any book like just can't offer. And that's probably the beauty of all debate, the fact that you get this chamber that is certainly not an echo chamber, right? Like structurally the opposite of it. And then the second thing that I've gained is friends with different viewpoints than me, right? Like debate forces you to socialize and really hear people out that come from entirely different states, backgrounds from you, and you compete with them so often, you know them on a first name basis, you get to know what their real lives are like, and you can see how real life events shape people's methods of thinking, right? Like your social experience is inseparable from your political ideology, the way that you view how the government ought to work. And debate, by virtue of it being a high school activity, sort of takes that social factor and that academic factor and combines it, and you get to know people who become your best friends and also reshape the way you think about government, which is a huge thing that I've taken from it now at the end of my career.
The people that I've met, especially surrounding that, like if it's nationals, it's one of the biggest tournaments. Even if it's online or not, you still have the ability to meet so much different people. And that's definitely going to be my biggest takeaway, even besides the fact that when I first started doing Congress, I couldn't get a sentence out correctly using proper grammar. But even then, the people that I've met definitely gave me the motivation to continue to be great and be just like them in life.
Yes, I love that.
I think the number one takeaway for me when it's come to Congress, especially at nationals, has been the proof that if you put in enough work, you can see results. I think sometimes, especially for like abstract skills like speaking and also like research, there's not always a clear victory in terms of, oh, now I'm the best at this, or there's no objective way to tell that you're good at something.
That I'm debating about are really important issues. They're things that don't end when the round ends. And just constantly reminding yourself that the issues that you're debating, the impacts that you're trying to impact out to, those can't just be things that are said like superficially to win a piece of plastic, because that like to me is like really shallow, and I hate it when debaters just make arguments and then like live their lives in a different way that doesn't reflect like compassion, that doesn't reflect like the values that they like try to espouse in Congress. And so for me, I think that it's just been first a lot of education from Congress. You learn so much because you debate so many different bills over the course of your career.
Oh, there's a lot. I think my biggest takeaway is kind of you fake it till you make it. Especially in Congress, there's a lot of decorum and a lot of stuff that someone either teaches to you or you learn for yourself in the experience of things. And I think Congress is such a nuanced world, and the way that people act in Congress is so different from normal, that a lot of what I've learned is just how to adapt yourself to a different kind of environment like that, and how to come off as not the biggest person in the room, but the most professional and the most laid back and kind of calm. So that persona has been especially beneficial. I think I'll keep that with me for the rest of my life.
The way that debate works, I think in general, taught me a lot about critical thinking and public speaking, and I think those two are skills that are broadly applicable for whatever industry you want to go into. You want to be a good doctor, you need to be able to tell your patient what's wrong. You want to be a good business person, you have to be able to explain to your shareholders why your investment is worthwhile. You want to be a politician, obviously. You want to be able to communicate your policy ideas and convince people. I think no matter what you go into in the future, public speaking and critical thinking are always invaluable skills. And I think those are the most important things I took away from nationals.
The biggest regret I have, and something that I think a lot of people, I guess, don't think about enough, is I wish I had been more inclusive than I was. Not that I ever made an active effort to be toxic or to be elitist, but I definitely think that in my position, there was a lot more I could have done to talk to people around and make individuals feel more comfortable or less nervous when they were dealing with such a stressful activity like nationals, like Congress at such a high level. And so just taking the time to be encouraging and reassuring to the people around you can do so much for them in the long run. And had I done more of that, I think I would have made, or at least hopefully have made, more of a difference on one or two individuals. And that's all the change I'd like to make in this activity.
I was in a bit of a different place in my life last year as compared to this one. And I think sometimes, especially if you're not in the best mindset outside of debate, that sort of like seeps through. And I think you can often see it when you're in your debate round, whether that's like you're just not on your game that day, or you have like you take your anger out on poor people who these poor individuals in your room who you're just yelling at. But I think it's important to not necessarily separate yourself entirely from like the outside world, but try to like channel that energy, because I know that there's a lot of adrenaline that I get and a lot of other people get when they start to debate. And I think it's important to not go overboard with that adrenaline and energy, but rather channel it and really focus it on the points and emphasize the points that are necessary to emphasize rather than just like going all out.
That I, in the beginning of my career, was so eager to be like, you're wrong, I'm right, I have the study, I have the number, and just going too much for the debate element of rebutting before you actually like truly listen and digest what the other person is saying. So much, obviously you debate to win, to compete, but not only does it make you a better person to sit back and listen, but you can give a far better rebuttal if you're actually listening to what your opponent says before you're writing your responses. And I've always been that tiger, that bull in the stall that is like ready to buck and like be right. And if you're like me, you're sort of hot-headed, hot-tempered like that, I would definitely encourage you to just sit back, breathe a little bit, really think, right? Like the person, the opponent that you're facing, they've done just as much work as you, just as much research. The truth about politics, it's not a STEM field, it's a humanity. There's no true right answer. So actually listen to the other person before you're ready to win and ask them a question that will dismantle their entire argument.
I would definitely, like, I try to have the motto, no regrets, but like, no matter how much you want to say that, there's still going to be something that you always look back on, like, I wish I did this different. I definitely wish that I had a lot more confidence when I first started initially, and I kept the same confidence going on. Because I feel like the best congressional debaters, the best people that are able to persuade and be able to speak are the ones that believe in what they're talking about. So someone can be extremely good at a congressional debate freshman year, and then they can get, when people say significantly worse, that's not true. It's just that they lose the lack of confidence. If you have confidence starting on and keep that same confidence, then you're going to do very well and be extremely successful in congressional debate, or even in life, in the art of persuasion, because you persuade at some point and you have to believe it before someone else does.
Okay, well, thank you, Clinton, for all of the question answers. Have a great
Regret not going to tournaments. Regret. I loved high school debate. I miss it every day. I loved high school debate. I miss it every day. And I think it was some of the life, along with some of the most amazing people I've gotten to meet. So really grateful for the community the debate gave me, the skills debate gave me, but most importantly, the life lessons.
One regret
the life lessons it taught me.
I'll have to say that kind of imposter syndrome when getting into elimination rounds. There were often times I was my biggest enemy in that round, and I kind of prevented myself from doing as well as I could have if I wasn't worried about like my appearance to big names or my points not being nuanced enough or my argumentation, all that kind of stuff. Just kind of keeping those, not tunnel vision, but blocking out all of the voices in your head that are kind of telling you that you're not good enough.
I came into tournaments really set on presenting what I had come to the tournament. So whatever I had prepped, whatever was in my prep document, like for those speeches, I wanted to present that, and I wasn't very open to like changing my speeches mid-round or like making it a little more malleable in the way that I presented it. And what I found to be the most successful thing for me over the like last part of this year has been making abrupt changes on the fly, even if it means like cutting out halves of entire points and like going with your gut, going with what matters on the fly. If an impact isn't going to matter in the round, then striking it from what you had originally written and not being a stickler to say everything that you came in with and just adapting to the flow of the round, because that's really, really important, especially if you don't get called on when you want to, so you can't give that like third constructive that you want to give. So I would say just like learning to be adaptable and to be more malleable. And I wish that that was a lesson I had learned a little bit earlier.